So using the Azure Databricks, what we do, we go ahead and get the data from our data lake. So let me show you how data lake looks like. So we are creating workspaces. We will get the workspace created here. So there is a workspace, and there are ways to get the data. So we have trying to get the data from various sources like a data lake store. You guys can see the data lake store does pull the data into Azure Databricks. We can get the data from other sources as well, third-party sources, external sources. It is a SQL warehouse that we can create. Right now, there is no SQL data warehouse. Apache Hive store you can run. You can run your SQL queries involving SQL warehouses. Then you can do your machine learning with it. Now, these limitations like data in regards to machine learning is not possible under your Azure data, under your Azure Synapse Analytics. So machine learning capabilities are built in here. Delta tables are given for your data engineering. That means the live table, and followed by data warehousing under the SQL category. So these are the skill sets of an Azure Databricks engineer. So if you want to be an Azure Databricks engineer, you should know how to handle data engineering operations. You should know handle, SQL operations in Azure, how to go ahead and use data warehousing, SQL operations in Azure Databricks. So what is the aim of this? So the aim of this is like we are pulling data from the storage in the accounts. We can use Azure Data Factory. We are using Azure Synapse. We are using Azure Data Lake. We are using Azure Databricks. And finally, we have to implement all of these data sets. We consider primarily the batch data sets, and how do you do handle the live data, which is streaming. For that, we have to use streaming analytics, and then we will come back to use either Azure Databricks or Synapse for the same. So in this learning, what you have built your skill sets in and around, you build your skill sets in and around storage in Azure. You build skill sets around Azure Data Factory, Azure Synapse, Azure Databricks, streaming, structured streaming using streaming datasets, and involving Azure Synapse, Azure streaming analytics. Whatever the data that is coming, you will handle via Azure Streaming Analytics, and integration with Power BI. Power BI is not included here, but we will go ahead and display our data as part of Power BI. So data needs to get implemented. So because of this learning path that I have mentioned, so this is how our journey for the training program will go. We'll start from storing of our data, then we'll pull that data into Data Factory, Synapse, then into Azure Databricks, and we'll handle complex operations using streaming and integrate with Power BI for our visualization. So with this, we have been able to get the skill sets of an Azure data engineer. And participants, once you complete this learning path, it is all that you have to get started, and you have to you should be writing your exam, and you will get yourself certified as Azure data engineer. Now, what next after this? There are various roles that you can play. You can become a data analyst. You can become a machine learning engineer. You can go to the machine learning, but for this, you need to have very strong skill sets in handling machine learning capabilities involving any of module like MXNet from Azure, or you should have skill set in Python. You should have something like TensorFlow. So that's a very great opportunities at a very long term. But for now, people, the immediate goal is to get yourself certified an Azure Databricks engineer, or you get yourself certified an Azure data engineer. So you can grab opportunities in your current role. So if you are a SQL developer or if you're a database engineer, you now have extended your skill set handling data engineering aspects. If you are handling Hadoop, now you are bringing skill set to Spark and taking it to the next level. And also you are getting skilled, upskill yourself with the latest services of Microsoft Azure, which are in high demand. So participants, everyone, are we good now? Have you understood people? So whatever the routes right now you are at, you have a long way to go if you are skilled enough to handle data operations involving storage, processing, ETL, data lakehouse platform, Azure Databricks. If you're skilled enough, people, there are plenty of opportunities that you can aim for. Now, having said this, in the last 40 minutes, I was trying to go ahead and give you the learning path and how we will go ahead and drive our learning path accordingly. I've been mentioning. Now it's time for you people to take or put some questions which you want to be discussed in detail. So can we start taking questions from your end? Participants, would you like to get started? Okay, if you don't want to get started, I'll get started. So the first question, whenever I have discussion with the participants, the first question they'll ask me, Kumar, is that we should have skill set in Python. I generally get to see. Or some of the people will ask me, Kumar, is that we should have skill sets in SQL? Participants, yes, I completely agree what your ask is all about. And it is good to have the skill sets in either of them. So here is the required skill set. So in the Azure data engineering skill set, candidates for this exam should have solid knowledge of data processing languages like SQL, Python, or Scala, any of these languages. But my suggestion, if you have good skill sets on SQL and Python, that will be very, very helpful for you. So participants, what we'll do is we will go ahead and consider learning of SQL, Python, and Spark all put together, and that module we call it as PySpark. We will go ahead and learn about PySpark. PySpark is very, very essential for your big data processing. So if you have good skill sets in handling PySpark, you can handle much of your Azure Databricks, you can handle much of your Azure Synapse Analytics. So the answer is yes, that you should have good skill sets in understanding Python as well as PySpark. And as part of the program, it was decided people that will have, included into our learning. So whenever you want to get started with Azure Databricks, you should have the skill set of PySpark, and we have decided to go ahead and include that learning for you as part of our curriculum. So separately, you don't need to go ahead and build a skill set. We are taking and considering as part of our current curriculum, which is PySpark module, whereas PySpark module was not mentioned here in the data engineering, but still we will make it as part of our learning. So we'll be having some sessions on Azure PySpark. Sorry, apologies, PySpark, Apache PySpark we will cover. That will be very, very helpful for you to do handling your Synapse, your Azure Databricks, streaming. Yeah. So participants, one of the most asked question I brought to you because a lot of people asked me this question. So I hence thought of putting the question and responding the answer. Okay. Yeah. Any other question, Ram, Lokesh, Prasad?
Kumar, one question.
Yes, continue, please.
Yeah. I mean, in real time, do we need to use Data Factory and Synapse both? Or you said like Synapse is a most advanced, which is having ETL capabilities and analytics. So we directly use Synapse.
By the way, very good question. See, I'll tell you, Synapse came later when Databricks was competing. Synapse came later. So what when organizations didn't had any kind of Synapse or Databricks present to them, they were utilizing Data Factory to do all the ETL operations. Now, a lot of companies who have already built ETL factories, already built ETL pipelines using Data Factory. Now it is very, very hard for them to migrate into Synapse because Synapse is more advanced version. So what Azure has done, Azure have understood the problem, and what they have done is inside data factory for existing customers